What if I told you that over half of your swing power comes from a part of your body you almost never actually practice?
Right. And what if I told you that relying on how your swing, actually feels is the exact thing ruining your golf game?
It sounds completely counterintuitive, doesn't it?
It really does. But look, the moment we stop treating the human body like some simple factory machine that just needs, straight lines and perfect circles, the real physics of a powerful golf swing finally reveal themselves.
And that is exactly what we are here to decode today. Welcome to this deep dive. Today we are stepping into the roles of your personal PGA professionals and sports scientists.
Yeah, our mission is to sift through this massive stack of sports science research, kinematic data, and elite coaching methodologies to uncover what is actually happening during a perfect golf swing.
Right, we want to take all that dense biomechanical data and translate it into clear, practical insights that you can, take straight out to the driving range.
Because the reality is golf is universally perceived as this brutally complex movement. We're always told it takes 10,000 hours of grueling practice to master.
Oh, absolutely. The 10,000-hour rule.
Right. But when you understand the underlying mechanics, you don't actually need 10,000 hours. You just need a better blueprint.
I love that. A
Oh.
better blueprint. So let's get right into it. I want to start with a really relatable struggle because I think everyone listening has experienced this.
Oh, for sure.
You step up to the tee, you swing completely out of your shoes, and the ball goes absolutely nowhere.
Yep. We've all been there.
Right. But then, literally on the next hole, you take what feels like this smooth, effortless swing, and you bomb it 280 yards right down the middle. So why is my body lying to me about how fast I'm swinging?
It's a brilliant question, and it really gets to the core of why golf is so incredibly frustrating. Human perception is, well, it's incredibly deceiving, especially when it comes to high-speed movement.
How so? Like, what does the data actually say about that?
So there's a study published in the International Journal of Golf Science that specifically looked at upper body kinematics and how golfers perceive their own performance.
Okay.
The researchers tracked everything with motion capture. I mean, thorax speed, arm speed, hand speed. And after every single swing, they asked the golfers to rate their own performance.
You'd think if a player whips their arms through the zone significantly faster, their brain would, register that speed and they would rate the swing higher.
You would think so, but the data showed the exact opposite. A golfer's rating of their own swing had absolutely zero correlation with their actual body movements.
Wait, zero.
Zero. They could not accurately feel when their thorax or hands were moving faster or more efficiently. The only metric, literally the only one that consistently correlated with a high self-rating from the players was their smash factor.
Which is the efficiency of ball speed relative to club speed. It's a pure impact metric.
Right, exactly.
It's like finding the absolute dead center of a tennis racket.
Yeah.
You have the most awkward, ugly form in the world. You could literally be falling backward off your right foot. But if you happen to hit that sweet spot, the feedback vibrating up the shaft into your hands tells your brain, hey, I just hit a perfect shot.
And that is the absolute danger of relying on feel. If your brain is constantly rewarding you based solely on the vibration of impact, how can you ever improve?
You can't really.
Exactly. You might be groove training a terrible mechanical flaw just because you occasionally find the center of the club face. Your body learns to compensate for the flaw just to get that sweet spot feeling.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, so this is why we have to discard feel as our primary teacher and actually look at the objective data.
So if feel's a liar, it makes sense that golfers historically turn to visual concepts to guide them instead.
Oh, definitely. Visuals are huge in golf instruction.
Right. And that leads us to one of the biggest visual illusions in golf history, the myth of the single swing plane. We've all been taught to imagine this giant pane of glass resting on our shoulders, and the goal is to keep the club sliding up and down that single flat surface.
It is a beautiful visualization, but advanced 3D motion capture completely shatters it. Dr. Young-Hoo Kwon and his team at Texas Women's University conducted this fascinating study.
The one with the motion capture system.
Yes, using a 250 hertz optical motion capture system on highly skilled golfers. They were looking to define what they called the functional swing plane, or FSP, and they found that the downswing is absolutely not one single plane. It actually consists of two very distinct phases.
Yeah, I remember seeing this data. There's the transition phase, which goes from the top of the backswing to the mid-downswing, and mechanically this phase is just messy.
Extremely messy.
Right. The club is changing direction, your
Yep.
weight is shifting, the body is completely rerouting the club, it's not on a clean plane at all. But then you hit the execution phase, from the mid-downswing through to the follow-through, and suddenly things lock into a clean, planar movement.
And this proves that the classic multi-pendulum model we've relied on in golf instruction for, 40 years, is a massive oversimplification.
Because it assumes too much rigidity.
Exactly. That old model assumes the shoulders and arms act as simple door hinges moving on a tilted plane. But Dr. Kwan's tracking showed the shoulder and arm joints deviate wildly from any single plane.
So they aren't just moving straight back and straight through.
Not at all. In fact, to generate real power, skilled golfers exhibit what researchers call a semi-planar or spiral swing. Your arms actually have to move somewhat independently of your trunk.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, they pull the club head down steeply past the initial plane during the transition and then flatten out into that functional swing plane right before impact.
Hold on a second, let me jump in here. If you're telling me that a single plane is anatomically incorrect and mechanically poor, what about Ben Hogan?
Ah, the classic Hogan example.
Right. Hogan's pane of glass is arguably the most famous instructional visual in the history of the sport. I mean, he literally drew it in his book, 5 Lessons, was one of the greatest ball strikers of all time, just completely wrong.
It's a completely fair question. And the data actually highlights Hogan's genius, but it also reveals the limitations of his visualization.
How so?
Well, the study found that Hogan's glass pane is a fantastic approximation, but only for the club head and the right elbow and only near impact.
Okay, so just at the very end of the swing.
Right. At impact, the left hand and right elbow are closely aligned with that functional swing plane. However, the major flaw is applying it to the whole body. If you try to force your shoulders, your hips, and your hands to stay on one rigid plane from the start of the takeaway all the way to the finish, you are actively fighting your own anatomy.
That makes so much sense. We shouldn't be trying to turn our complex skeletons into a rigid, two-dimensional door hinge.
Exactly. It's just not how we're built.
So if the body isn't moving on a simple plane, how are all these moving parts coordinating to generate such massive speed? Because I know I always try to muscle the ball with my shoulders from the top of the swing, and it never works. What is the actual engine of a golf swing?
The answer is optimal kinetic sequencing. Speed in a golf swing isn't about moving everything at once, and it certainly isn't about muscling it from the top. It's about a delayed proximal to distal sequence.
Proximal to distal, meaning power transfers from the center of your body, the proximal part outward to your limbs, and finally down to the club head, the distal part.
Precisely. Let's look at the exact simulation numbers from Dr. Sasha McKenzie's research on muscular torques, because this maps the perfect swing down to the exact percentage.
Okay, lay the numbers on me.
For absolute optimal speed, your torso rotation, your core, starts firing at 0% of the downswing. It initiates the whole move. Next, your shoulder abductor kicks in at 30%. The shoulder abductor is the muscle group that pulls your arm away from the midline of your body.
Got it. So core first, then shoulder at 30.
Then your arm's external rotator, the muscles that turn your shoulder outward, waits until 60%. And finally, the wrist's ulnar deviator, the muscles that hinge your wrist downward, fires at 71%.
Wow. So it's like cracking a bullwhip.
Yes.
You don't just shove the whip forward all at once. You start by throwing the heavy handle, that's your torso. Then you pull back, and that massive momentum transfers down the lighter, thinner cord, your arms, until all of that compounded energy reaches the tiny tip of the whip, breaking the sound barrier.
I love that.
And the tip of the whip is your club head.
That is the perfect analogy. The energy has to cascade. And we know from the research exactly what happens when you break that sequence.
I'm guessing it's not good.
It's terrible. McKenzie ran computer simulations forcing a distal joint, like the wrist, to fire prematurely alongside the shoulder. When you force the wrist to activate early, which is what golfers call casting from the top, the clubhead speed plummets from 52.6 meters per second down to 47.9 meters per second.
That is a massive bleed of power.
It really is.
If your hands panic and fire early, you've spent all your accumulated energy before the clubhead ever reaches the golf ball. It's literally like the whip unrolling before you've even finished moving the handle.
And that brings us to the most crucial part of this entire sequence, where it ends. The whip ends at the tip. The kinetic sequence ends at your hands,
Okay.
which reveals perhaps the most shocking data point in all of this biomechanical research. The sheer percentage of power generated solely by your wrists.
So how much power is actually sitting at the end of that sequence?
Yeah.
When I hit a drive 280 yards, What percentage of that club head speed is coming just from my wrists and forearms?
It's staggering, over 50%.
Wait, over 50%?
Yes. More than half of the tangential clubhead velocity at the exact moment of impact comes exclusively from your wrists and forearms.
That is wild. I would have guessed like 20% tops.
Most people do. But specifically, we are talking about two distinct movements. First is wrist flexion and extension, which is simply bending your wrist up and down.
Okay.
Second is forearm pronation and supination. To visualize that, imagine holding a steering wheel. Rolling your palms down toward the dirt is pronation, and rolling your palms up toward the sky is supination.
Got it. So the twisting motion of the forearm.
Exactly. A study out of the University of Western Australia built a forward kinematic model and found that if you mathematically restrict the flexion of the wrist, you completely destroy the velocity at impact.
Wow.
While your torso and hips are vital for starting the chain and acting as a stable base, your wrists are the ultimate speed multipliers.
Okay, so how do we actually apply this out on the driving range? Because I really like the practical coaching perspective from Eric Cagorno on this.
Oh yeah, his checkpoints are great.
Yeah, he outlines 3 specific checkpoints for harnessing this wrist power. First, you need to hit a 90-degree upward hinge by the time your lead arm is parallel to the ground in the backswing.
Right.
Second, you have to hinge on the correct plane pointed at or just inside the ball target line. But the third checkpoint is the absolute trick to the whole thing. You have to flatten your lid wrist at the top.
Flattening that lead wrist is non-negotiable for consistent ball striking.
Why is that so hard for people to do?
Think about the geometry of your hands on the grip. Your lead wrist, the left hand for a right-handed golfer, is primarily responsible for the up and down hinging motion. Your trail wrist, the right hand handles the back and forth motion.
Right.
When you hinge the club up, your lead wrist naturally wants to cup or bend backward toward your forearm. To offset that and flatten the lead wrist, you actually have to consciously bend your trail wrist backward.
Cagorno uses a brilliant visualization here, actually. He says to think of the wrist release like a hammer striking a nail.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, if your wrist doesn't violently unhinge downward into the back of the nail, there is zero power. If you just drag the hammer across the top with stiff wrists, you won't drive the nail. In golf, you have to have that downward wrist hinge to create a descending angle of attack and compress the golf ball.
And in biomechanics, that downward unhinging is known as ulnar deviation, or downcocking. The biomechanists at Atlanta Golf and Fitness emphasize this heavily.
Right.
They point out that applying this specific downward force through the strike zone acts as your biggest speed amplifier, but there is a catch.
There's always a catch.
Always. You can't just snap your wrists while standing perfectly still. If you focus solely on unhinging your wrist and you stop turning your torso, your rotation completely stalls out. Your body has to continue clearing out of the way to create physical space for your arms to swing down and release that wrist angle.
So we know the wrists hold all the power. But here's the trap. If your wrists fire with all that power, but they are angled just 1 degree off, say, you ignored the advice to flatten it, and your lead wrist is cupped at the top of the swing, you don't just lose speed.
No, it's much worse than that.
You trigger a devastating chain reaction that completely breaks the geometry of your downswing.
You do. The physics of a cupped lead wrist dictate that it immediately makes the shaft of the golf club too steep during the downswing. Thus, it forces the club face wide open.
And an open club face swinging down on a steep angle brings us to another massive misconception in golf instruction: the face-to-path illusion.
Yes, it's a big one.
For decades, players were taught a very simple rule. The path that your club swings on determines where the ball starts, and the angle of the club face determines how the ball curves in the air.
And modern data conclusively proves that old rule is entirely backward.
Entirely backward.
Completely. A major study presented at the International Sports Engineering Association, using a massive sample size of players alongside rigid robot testing, demystified this. They layered TrackMan radar data over high-speed motion capture.
Okay, and what did they find?
The results proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that the ball's initial horizontal launch direction is dictated 61 to 83% by the face angle, not the club path.
Okay, wait. Let me walk through a scenario to make sure I'm fully grasping this.
Go for it.
Let's say I'm a right-handed player. I swing the club on a path that is perfectly straight down the target line. But because my lead wrist was cupped, my club face is wide open, let's say 5 degrees open to the right of my path.
Okay.
The old myth says my ball starts straight because my path is straight, and then it slices to the right. But the new science says something totally different.
Much different. Because the face angle controls up to 83% of the initial start direction, your golf ball is not starting straight. It is launching immediately to the right, heavily dictated by that 5-degree open face. And here is where the physics of the slice come in. Because your club path is traveling straight, but the face is pointing to the right, you have created an oblique impact.
An oblique impact, basically a glancing blow.
Yes. In launch monitor terms, this creates a negative face-to-path ratio. When the face and path don't match, the friction of the club face slicing across the back of the golf ball tilts the ball's spin axis.
So it's compounding the error.
Exactly. So not only does the ball start right because of the open face, but that tilted spin axis causes the air pressure to aggressively slice the ball even further to the right as it flies.
That's a double whammy. The TrackMan data for the PGA Tour shows exactly how punishing this is. If a tour pro hits a driver that carries 275 yards and their face is open just 5 degrees to their path, that ball will curve 44 yards to the right.
44 yards.
You aren't just missing the fairway, you are in the next fairway over.
Which is why understanding the relationship between the face and the path is so crucial. If you want a straight shot, you need a 0 face-to-path ratio. That means the club face and the club path are pointing in the exact same direction at the moment of impact. Any deviation between the two creates a tilted spin axis, which creates curve.
So we have a major problem. A cupped wrist leads to a steep shaft, an open face, and a 44-yard slice. How do we fix this devastating geometry? What is the actual antidote?
Well, according to the research, 39 out of 40 touring professionals utilize a specific mechanical move to solve this. It's called shallowing the club.
Shallowing.
Yes. Shallowing is a fascinating biomechanical phenomenon, and Dr. Sasha McKenzie's research explains the physics of it beautifully. During the transition, when you are changing directions from the backswing to the downswing, the goal is to get the club's center of mass to drop slightly under your hand path.
When you say center of mass, you essentially mean a heavy club head at the end of the shaft.
Correct. When that heavy club head drops behind and slightly below your hands during the start of the downswing, physics takes over.
How so?
Because the heavy mass is trailing behind your hands, centrifugal force naturally wants to align that mass with your hand path as you rotate toward the ball. This force literally twists the shaft for you, naturally helping to square the club face without you having to manually manipulate your wrists.
That is incredible. The physics of centrifugal force actually fix the open face for you, provided you shallow the club correctly.
Exactly.
Give you that sensation of the club temporarily dropping or becoming weightless in transition. But how do we actually train our bodies to do that? Because there was a great study in the research comparing two practical drills, right? The rhythm method versus the position method for making acute kinematic alterations to the swing.
Yes, and the study found that the position method was incredibly effective for training players to shallow the swing and increase club head speed.
How does the drill work?
The drill requires you to take a much wider backswing arc. You keep your right elbow extended and your wrists fairly neutral for as long as comfortably possible during the takeaway.
I see why that works. By keeping the arms wide, you produce a longer lever, which equals more potential velocity.
All right.
And by keeping the wrists neutral, meaning you don't aggressively cock your wrists early in the swing, you prevent yourself from taking the club too far past its position of maximum gravitational potential energy. You actually harness the weight of gravity to pull the club head down on an inside shallow path rather than having to heave it from the top with your shoulders.
Exactly. And by not over-rotating your torso right away, your arms and body remain in perfect synchronization.
It all connects back to the sequence.
It does. This wider, more neutral position practically forces your body to start the downswing in that optimal proximal to distal sequence we talked about earlier, shifting the lower body, turning the torso, dropping the arms, and finally releasing the wrists.
We have completely decoded the body and the club. But before we wrap up, we have to look at how we measure all of this success out on the course and what the future of golf science holds. We've talked a lot today about TrackMan and radar launch monitors. They are everywhere now. But they aren't flawless, are they?
They are incredible tools for tracking the flight of the golf ball once it leaves the club face. But predicting the precise club face angle and the dynamic loft at the exact millisecond of impact is incredibly difficult for modern radar.
Oh, I guess that.
It comes down to the violently dynamic physics of impact itself.
And dynamic loft being the actual angle of the club face at the moment of impact, as opposed to the static loft stamped on the bottom of the iron.
Right. What people don't realize is that while the golf ball is physically compressed against the metal face of the club, an event that lasts roughly 1/2000th of a second, the face angle itself can change by over 6 degrees.
Wait, 6 degrees of change while the ball is literally still touching the metal?
Yep.
That completely alters everything we just discussed regarding face-to-path calculations if the radar is guessing at the wrong fraction of a millisecond.
It does. And this introduces a concept known as the gear effect. Imagine two gears interlocked with one another. If you turn the left gear clockwise, the right gear is forced to turn counterclockwise.
Okay, I can picture that.
When you strike a golf ball off center, say, out on the toe of the club, the force of the impact causes the club head to twist open. Because the club face is twisting one way, it imparts the opposite spin on the golf ball, acting just like those two gears.
So the ball acts like the second gear, spinning back toward the center of the fairway.
Exactly.
This is why PGA Master Professional Gary Wyron always championed the concept of centeredness of contact. You can have the most expensive radar data in the world, and you can have a perfect swing path. But if you don't hit the center of the face, the gear effect takes over, the club twists, and all your swing data is completely compromised.
Which is why the future of evaluating player performance is evolving. We are moving beyond just measuring swing curves or the simple distance to the hole. Researchers at the Technical University of Munich are developing what is called the isopar method.
Isopar, what does that do?
Conventional golf statistics often ignore the unique contextual difficulty of individual shots. Your putting performance, for example, is heavily skewed by how good or bad your approach shot was. Isopar analyzes the performance of individual shots completely independent from the sequence, visualizing the true, objective difficulty of specific areas on a hole.
That is fascinating.
It really represents the future of course management strategy.
We have covered a massive amount of ground today. Let's quickly summarize the core lessons for you to take to the range. First, throw out the visual of the single, rigid swing plane. The swing happens in two distinct phases, and it only flattens out right before impact.
Second, speed doesn't come from muscling the club. It comes from a delayed proximal to distal kinetic sequence. Think of cracking a whip from your torso down to the club head.
Third, respect the ultimate power of your hands. Your wrists and forearms are your primary speed generators, accounting for over 50% of your impact velocity.
Fourth, remember the face-to-path reality. Your club face angle dictates where the ball starts, not your swing path.
Right. And finally, shallowing the club's center of mass beneath your hand path uses centrifugal force to effortlessly square that face.
Perfectly summarized.
Which leaves us with a final paradigm-shifting question for you to mull over. If the hard biomechanical data proves that wrist and forearm motions account for more than 50% of your club head speed at impact, why do we spend 90% of our time on the driving range obsessing over our hip rotation and shoulder turn?
That is the million-dollar question.
Right. Are we dedicating all our practice time to the wrong parts of the body?
It's a profound thought. It really challenges the entire foundation of how most of us approach improvement.
It really does. Maybe we aren't simple machines stamping metal after all.
Obviously not.
If you enjoyed today's deep dive, please subscribe to our channel and share it with fellow golfers, coaches, and PGA professionals.
And if there is a topic you would like us to research, analyze, and discuss in a future deep dive, feel free to send us an email or connect with us through LinkedIn.
Whether your interest is golf biomechanics, kinematics, ground reaction forces, swing mechanics, putting, coaching, club fitting, technology, or sports science, we would love to hear from you.
Our team will review your submission, conduct extensive research, analyze the available evidence, and may create a dedicated deep dive, article, video, or testing project based on your topic.
Thank you for being part of the eCoach 360 Degree community.